Roger, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. This is a great time to be alive. I really believe that America is about to enter into a golden age, the age of Trump, which will be an age of peace, prosperity, security, and justice. There is an optimism in the air that did not exist a month ago. There's a new sense of spirit against those who are tired of seeing their rights taken away, who are tired of seeing the decline of the country. We're tired of seeing this literal invasion of illegals straining the social networks and the budgets of counties and cities and states and the nation. Tired of ice skating closer and closer to World War III in not one area of the globe, but at least two. So people have voted for peace and prosperity, and it wasn't close. Donald Trump has been given a historic mandate, and I think that this is far more than a victory for him, although it's certainly a testimony to his resilience and his persistence and his toughness and his resolve, because he didn't just overcome a Democrat campaign, he had to overcome the illicit use of the wheels of justice against him in a tsunami of lawfare, which the voters saw through and rejected. So I think
Yeah.
it's an amazing accomplishment, and he stands, I think, a much wiser man than he was when he was first elected president, even though he made history in his first term in terms of reform, in terms of prosperity. Now so he's already proven he can do this. He now will do it again.
Okay, let's talk about some of his cabinet picks because some of these are a bit confusing. Some of these, in my opinion, are extremely deep state type actors, Marco Rubio being one of them. I don't understand why somebody like Trump, who claims to be wanting to end wars, anti war, why he would choose one of the biggest warmongers to become Secretary of State. Marco Rubio has not met a war he doesn't like. He hasn't met a regime change he doesn't love. I mean, he's on Twitter. I'm sure you've seen his Twitter account. He gets violent. He was threatening Maduro down in Venezuela, saying, showing him pictures of Gaddafi, bloody Gaddafi, saying, "You're next." So, this guy, what do you make of him selecting Marco Rubio of all the people he could have selected? And Marco, by the way, was not one of his biggest allies in the Senate in his first term. Guys like Ted Cruz voted alongside Trump way more so than Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio was probably middle of the pack, if not middle bottom of the pack, as far as supporting Trump's agenda. So what do you make of this particular pick? This is the one I really don't like, I should say.
Kim, you really have to stop mincing words and tell people how you really think. Look, Marco, I actually, on a personal level, I very much like Marco Rubio. And in full disclosure, he's been very helpful to my family and constituent service things pertaining to my wife's cancer. So, and I think the answer here is that in this hemisphere, particularly, he's been a staunch anti communist. He's been very hardline on Cuba. There are some who say it's time to normalize relations with the regime. I disagree with that. So does
Hmm.
he. I am not a fan of the Venezuelan government. My concern is that whoever replaces them would be just as corrupt as they are. And I've certainly disagreed with Senator Rubio on numerous issues because I'm a more libertarian minded, anti war, more in the
Right.
tradition of Ron and Rand Paul in terms of my personal philosophy. However, I do think every member of the Trump team understands that this is not going to be their agenda. That happened to some extent in the first term, where people who were appointed, like H.R. McMaster or General John Kelly, believed that it was their role to dilute, delay, or derail the America First agenda, an anti-war, pro-prosperity, pro-peace agenda. Uh, and that's not going to happen again. So I think that Marco Rubio, of all those who ran against Donald Trump, has been smart enough to repair his personal relationship with the president. He delivered a crushing blow to Governor DeSantis when he endorsed his home state. He endorsed President Trump over his home state governor, as did Senator Rick Scott. And Marco will, I think, carry out the president's goals. The president's goals, I think, are pretty clear. He wants to stop the killing and end the war in Ukraine between both sides, and he's prepared to use personal diplomacy to do it. Marco Rubio is not going to oppose the president's view. In fact, he probably supports it. I'm confident he supports it.
Yeah.
This, I think, is going to, I mean, there are a few places here where I think the people chosen would not have been my first choice, perhaps, but I trust the president, and I trust the fact that each one of these people understands that this is going to be Trump's agenda. Further proof of that is the fact that the president is personally involved in the selection of assistant secretaries, undersecretaries, and deputy secretaries, as well as personally involved in who leads independent agencies like the FCC, for example, or the SEC. Which means this did not happen 4 years ago, which is why you had this infiltration of rhinos and globalists and neocons in the first term. And despite that, Donald Trump started no new foreign wars. He brought tens of thousands of troops home from the Middle East without having the countries they were withdrawn from collapse into the hands of our enemies when he did. It was a more peaceful world. It was only the unpredictability of Trump that kept the Russians from invading Ukraine. The Russians have made it clear from the beginning that this country signed two different agreements, the Budapest Memorandum and the Minsk Accords, in which we agreed not to push Ukraine into NATO, which means
Mhm.
really not to have missiles on the ground in Ukraine pointed at Russia, not to mention bioweapons labs, which, yes, Victoria Nuland blurted out in under oath in a Senate hearing, and then tried to walk back. But we know our reality. So, but Putin would never have invaded our ally Ukraine if Trump were president. Xi would not have designs right now and be planning to move on Taiwan because of the unpredictability, the strength of Donald Trump. When they saw the fall of Afghanistan, and when they saw us suddenly pony up hundreds of billions of dollars for Iran, when Iran is this close to having a nuclear weapon, if they don't already have one from their Chinese patrons, uh, all of our adversaries around the world figured out that Joe Biden was a patsy, that you could pretty much do anything to the United States and all you might get is a strong letter of protest. Not so with Donald Trump. So I think it made for a safer world. Under Trump, we abandon yet again the neocon idea that we need to be going around the world looking for wars to get into, and go back to the fundamental peace through strength views of Ronald Reagan and Dwight Eisenhower. Trump is in that school. He is not in the Bush neocon school.
But that only works if you're going to back it up, right? I mean, what does peace through strength really mean? And I don't know if it will work anymore. I don't know if Putin or Xi or any of these or Iran, I don't know if they're afraid of the United States anymore. And I think they're willing to test it.
Well, let me address it. I think that our military is in horrific shape between those mustered out because they refused a mandatory vaccination and the DEI policies. This is no longer a lethal fighting force. So, just as Trump rebuilt the military in his first term, he needs to rebuild our military so we're at peak strength. People do not respect weakness; they don't. They only respect strength. Uh, and, however, the other point of this is that Trump is a negotiator. So
Hmm.
instead of going back to having no dialogue with the dictator who is the head of North Korea, you go back to having a dialogue. Right now, there are no negotiations going on regarding the Ukraine-Russia conflict. One where we all would like to see the killing stop, but this administration isn't even in negotiations or talks, and they won't let the Ukrainians have any dialogue with the Russians. These are not people who want to solve this conflict. These are people who just want war.
So, how Putin has said he doesn't believe that Trump is going to be able to come in and actually do anything meaningful to end the war. Putin has said, I don't really care who wins, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, nothing is actually going to change. And again, Roger, I just don't think that Putin's going to listen to. I think the one thing that has been said that the idea would be, and I think this was said by who was it that actually said this on Fox News? It was one of his like surrogates, I guess, claimed that Trump said he would basically threatened Putin with, come to the table, do an agreement, or we're going to give Ukraine more weapons than you've ever seen, more weapons than you can imagine. And I
Yeah,
just don't think Putin is
I
going to
saw
respond to that.
First of all, that's an unattributed quote, so I'm not certain that that's the president's view.
Okay.
Secondarily, you don't negotiate in public. No master negotiator negotiates in public. The president knows that he can have a dialogue with Vladimir Putin anytime he wants to. But we should also not assume that all the concessions must come from Russia. In the beginning of this war, Joe Biden blurted out that he was willing to give the Donbass back to the Russians. This is before they started the war. He said it. But then they say, well, that's what Trump will hand over half the country. These are the same people who say Putin's problem here is one of just territorial conquest. He wants to gobble up Ukraine, then he'll take France, he'll take Germany, he'll take Poland. This is nonsense. This is
Hmm.
nonsense. This is about our violation of two agreements and threatening to push Ukraine into NATO in violation of international law. That's what we're doing. Now people say, "Oh, you're a stooge for the Russians." No, I have relatives mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. Believe me, I have no affinity for the Russians, but I have less affinity for World War III, and that's where
Yeah.
we're headed at this point. Trump can access both sides, and I think he will negotiate a settlement. I don't know what that settlement looks like, but I do know you don't negotiate, in public.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's going to try. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's just whether or not Putin will accept it. I mean, that's it really kind of boils down to that. I don't know if Ukraine has much of a choice on whether or not they accept it, but I just don't know if Putin will. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show. If you want to watch the full show, visit KimIversonShow.com. The show airs every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.